when it's a more personal and intimate grandson album, I wanted it to be a more personal and intimate soundscape. When you put on your headphones and close your eyes, I wanted it to feel less maximal. I think people have always expected from me a certain like cinematic explosiveness. And I think we tried to still keep that energy, but rely more on organic sounds that you can kind of more easily recognize and place in a live setting.
Let's start before we get into the kind of actual meat of this record. Let's talk about the aims going in. You know, you'd obviously had success with the last record, a lot of kind of high concept stuff kind of going on around it and everything. I want to get into the music side of this in a big way in a second, but just initially, what were those kind of aims for you when you were thinking, okay, time to start working on this next full-length record, this is what I want to do going in?
Yeah, I think that my goal with this record it was different than anything I'd done in the past, and I think kind of different from the other things I saw happening in the scene. I felt like just I don't know that I had done an album for my fans. I don't know if I had ever made a project where the goals that I set were being as honest as I could be and deepening the existing relationship between me and the fans that I've gotten to know over the last 5 years. I've made it an album with a whole bunch of like rippers on it. It's gonna be a fat journey of sound, but at the same time, I think I tried to make the songwriting as personal and intimate as I knew how to make it. I tried to draw on genres of music that I might not have otherwise drawn from, particularly hip hop in how I told stories throughout the album. And I really just, my goal with it was to just be super personal and make an album that could just kind of serve as like a time capsule for my life and for the lives of my fans who have gone through this journey with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we'll come on to the lyrics and stuff because it's clearly like it's easily your most personal work, man, but just musically as well. I mean, what's fascinating is like I always associate what you do is that it's a little bit of a punch in the face a lot of the time. You know, it's very in your face in a very positive way, particularly in that live show. It's big energy, it's big hitting your heart. People are going to press play on this record, and that soft opening hits you in the face in a whole different way. It took me aback, but in a really nice way. It's so soft, it's so unexpected from you. This kind of more vulnerable side, and we hear that a lot through this record. This is a lot more of a softer, more understated play for you, but it kind of feels a lot more powerful because of that. Tell me a little bit about the sound structure. You know, I guess it really is different instrumentation as well. It feels like a lot more kind of a softer playing sound. That must have been an intention of yours.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt as though I just, any time that I started building one of these big pentatonic bluesy Tom Morello inspired riff world, I just started feeling like this imposter syndrome. I just started feeling like I've done so much and accomplished so much in this sound and in this space. As a music fan, I draw influence from so many different places, and I didn't want to feel like at this stage in my life and career that I'm sitting back into this comfort zone sonically, and that what you've seen so far is what you can expect from Grandson. And that is a risk in and of itself. And it's scary to put out this album that while it's still me at its in its DNA, it is definitely, as you said, softer and draws on alternative hip hop. So a part of that was me just wanting to connect with the types of music that I grew up listening to, and so the intro of the album is actually a recording of my father's from the late 1970s that I repurposed and had my partner, girlfriend, collaborator sing on, and we tried to take a lot of these more emotional and like somber tones and use them in a haunting way to set up the anger and the hard-hitting energy that does still end up coming on the record in spots. But yeah, I was listening to a lot of Little Sims while making this record. I was listening to a lot of Mac Miller on this record. Yeah, just trying to explore alternative music as a much broader thing than just alternative rock and roll, which is another way of saying rock and roll.
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny. It's like that definitely comes through those hip hop influences. I think you wear those on your sleeve on this record, and very, very successfully. Because like, let's get that out of the way. This is a great record, man. Like, this is a really like, congratulations for real. This is a really,
Thank
really
you.
great achievement.
Thank you.
Because
I'm
it
glad you
walks
think
that.
so.
No, for real though, it walks. Because you're right. It would have been. In somebody else's hands, maybe it would have seemed like a bit of a risk making a move like this, but I think you handle it very, very well, and I think it balances out the elements of what's gone before with what you're trying to do now very, very well. So congrats on that, first of all.
Thank you. I don't want to find myself waking up one day and feeling as though my catalog doesn't reflect the ever-changing person and artist that I know that I am. I know that I have a lot to say. I know that in 2023, you stand to benefit more from being as one-dimensional as possible. The more I can consistently and cohesively be one thing on every video, every post, every day, the greater chance there is of the world at large associating grandson with being the blah, blah, blah. And for me, that was this new Rage Against the Machine, this new political rock. And I'm still to be unpolitical is to be privileged enough to be able to have the luxury of ignoring what's happening in the world. And that's not what I'm doing with this record. It's not what I'm doing with my career. I will continue to make music that is empowering and that draws on the work being done by activists around the world to make a more just society. I just feel like this is an opportunity, like I said. I wanted to make an album that was super personal, and I just want my fans to leave and go, I know this artist. And some artists we look up to and revere for being, larger than life, like David Bowie walking down the street. There would be something untouchable about a Frank Ocean. That's just never been me. I love being able to connect with fans. I want them to feel like they have a seat at my dinner table, and a lot of the themes of my music around mental health, around addiction, I had never really taken the opportunity to bring fans into why and how those things became so important to me. Like, those things are important to me because I've lived them. These things are important to me. Addiction is important to me because it is a mental health disease that runs in my family. Mental health matters to me because I've had these thoughts of suicide. I've had these impulses for a decade now that I've been working through. And angry music is a good backdrop for that. But when I found myself making this album of like alternative pop radio songs and watching this onset of pop punk music and this temptation I felt to do a thing that's going to do a thing instead of doing a thing because it's me, that was where I was like, well, I'm just going to make this weird personal album, and either I'm going to completely sabotage my career or it's going to bring fans closer to me than ever before. And that's who this is for anyways.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Like, the reason you mentioned something like the pop punk revival or whatever you want to call it at the minute, the reason it's working is because a lot of the artists that are coming to the fore in that new wave are treating it authentically. If you tried that, it wouldn't have been authentic, and you know it. You've got to do something that's personal to you. You've got to do something that's authentic to you, and clearly that's what you've attempted here, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. I also think that some of the pop punk shit is popular because it's familiar and it's not difficult to make a thing that sounds like a thing that is authentic. And I myself felt the temptation and the impulse to go away and come back. And, we even did it. We did take this swing at it. I had this song with Travis Barker and Kesha, and, we made this song that it was authentic to me. It's a song about not giving up, but it's told through a structure of rock music that I didn't want to make an entire album of. And, when you do things and take chances, some of them are going to pan out and some of them aren't. And this is in your life, this is in your work, this is in your relationships, and not all that's going to be your fault. If you get excited for the big game and you miss the shot, you better make peace with the decisions that you made that got you there. And I think for me, it's like this whole time that I've been grandson, as long as I've been making music, it's because it's served as a way out for me emotionally, and it's something I'm comfortable failing at. You know, like if Bloodwater never was a massive global hit, if I never had these opportunities, I would still stand by all these records because they were me. And I wasn't even that big a rock music fan when I first started making grandson music. I didn't even really know what was happening around me. But as I've started touring more, as I've started being more aware of what's happening behind the scenes, there's been this competitiveness that has come out and that's rooted in insecurity. And so for me, this album, I had to push back against some of those impulses. I had to make something that I could just stand behind and press play and go, I love this. Like, I don't know if any of you understand it, but I also don't think I'm that special. And so if I like it, there's going to be some other people that like it. And ultimately it's about acceptance. And that I don't know that I make a very good rock star, but I'm going to try and be as personal as I can. And somehow I've tripped and fallen ass backwards into this career where I'm playing shows around the world, where people have tattoos of my lyrics and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, fuck, I'll do it for you. I'll do it for them and make this album as I know how to make it. And we can enjoy it, and fuck everyone else. That's kind of how I've been approaching it.
It's a good attitude to have, but it's a delicate balancing act as well, isn't it? Because you're experimenting with these musical styles that are clearly, you know, embedded in what you do to an extent, but it's coming out in new ways and ways that we haven't heard from you before in terms of your actual recorded music. And what I thought was really interesting, particularly on a track like Drones, right, which obviously, you know, it's people have really latched onto that already. That seems like a really kind of big success initially. And what I love about that is that yes, you can reference Mac Miller, you can reference all these kind of artists you've already listed and mentioned there. When I first heard that for the first time, I went, "Oh, that's Radiohead." I'm getting Radiohead all the way through in the beginning.
Totally.
I'm getting later period Radiohead there, and then immediately you do something very clever, which is we hit that chorus and it goes off in a completely new direction. Little poppy hook in there. It's difficult to balance that, isn't it? You do it very well on that song and on this record, but like taking that big mix of influences you want to play with and finding how to kind of use them just enough, if that makes sense. Was that a challenge for you, kind of figuring out where you wanted these new styles to actually fit within your overall sound?
Yeah, it was very unpleasant, to be honest with you, until we figured it out. And there was this kind of eureka moment where we kind of established what this album's going to sound like, and then we could go back in on these songs I had written and retrofit them to this new direction. But I give a lot of credit to, you know, the songwriters that I worked with, the producers that gave me their time and energy and patience, because I was figuring a lot of these things out in real time. I knew that I wanted, when it's a more personal and intimate grandson album, I wanted it to be a more personal and intimate soundscape. When you put on your headphones and close your eyes, I wanted it to feel less maximal. I think people have always expected from me a certain like cinematic explosiveness. And I think we tried to still keep that energy, but rely more on organic sounds that you can kind of more easily recognize and place in a live setting. And I drew a lot of influence from like Turnstile in that sense. That's another great example of a band who have changed and evolved and put out a bunch of albums. And so going back in, but what was different about this sort of album from something like Glow On is that I was working with different producers on different songs. So it was difficult to build that continuity without having one kind of person overseeing the whole thing. And so I really played a much bigger role in producing it than I had in the past. And I asked producers to buy in to something bigger that was going to be not just the one or two or three songs that they touched, but that if we could all come together and kind of find what this sound was going to be, that there just wouldn't be anything like it. And I do think that we figured that out.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's come across very successfully, man. And I want to mention as well, we've touched on the fact that there's a very personal nature to these lyrics. Not just the fact that you're using all these musical styles that are clearly very embedded in your DNA, but yes, lyrically, you're opening up in a way that I've not heard you do before. And there's a lyric that really leapt out at me. It's in the track called Eulogy, which gets deeply personal anyway, as you well know, like I have to tell you. But the line that leapt out at me was, "Rest in peace to my positivity, all it's given me is false hope." And you are a man who, particularly in the live arena, has really pushed, like, no, we can power through these hard times, we can overcome things. I don't think that's gone away from you, certainly, but is that something that was kind of weighing on you in those big statements, those big messages that you've always tried to convey? I just find it interesting that, is the positivity getting you down, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, it can for sure. And I think that pretending it doesn't only sets up an unrealistic expectation for anybody else who's interested in doing this sort of work. Being the opener night in, night out is not a bad job. It's not necessarily a super easy job. And I spent a long time last year playing in arenas and trying to preach a certain level of engagement with people that were still looking for their seats and spilling their popcorn. And so being an arena opener was a really eye-opening and at times kind of deflating experience. And I had to really swallow a lot of ego and pride around that. And just watching the inevitable procession of business as usual continue to march on is a thing that I'll spend my entire life and career struggling to always find examples of progress, because in so many ways there's so much that needs doing that feels undone. But I wrote that song from a very low point in my mental health, and again, it felt good to get it out. It felt good to put something out that other people can relate to. But I think first and foremost, I always try to end these albums with an amount of positivity or optimism. This and again, it's like it's an album about being alone. It's also an album that's about acceptance and accepting yourself for who you are, and accepting that with the high points come low points, with optimism comes feeling defeated, and trying to just like ride that balance as honestly as you can, and making room for what the feelings that come up.
I mean, that optimism absolutely comes through, but we know it from the jump because you just have to look at that title. I love you. I'm trying. I'm trying. You're
Yeah.
not giving up hope. It's still there. You're trying to push through. Was that like an obvious, obviously it's a title track as well, but did that always feel like that's the phrase that we need to sum up the record as a whole?
It was a phrase that kept coming up. There was a certain desperation that I was feeling in trying to keep the various pieces of my life together, without losing myself in the process. And it was something I needed to ask of the people around me to give me that consideration. And that's a difficult ask. It puts other people in a hard place. And that comes from being in a long distance relationship while you're on the road. It comes from spending 2 years not putting out music while I tried to figure this out. Um, so it was a phrase that was coming up a lot, and it was actually just a working title in the same way that I found the name Grandson. It wasn't. I didn't know as soon as I had it that this was going to be the thing. I just kind of put a little asterisk next to it and then waited for a better idea to come. And then when it didn't, I know better than to let a good thing go to waste.
Hey, if it works, it works. Absolutely. It works and it clicks and it fits the mood for sure. I guess I always find it odd asking artists before a record's even coming out, like, what's next? But with you, it's interesting because you have clearly opened up whole new avenues for yourself here. So even though I'm sure you're not ready to leave this particular world here yet, what do you think it does open up for you in terms of you? Do you feel like, are there other styles you want to explore and incorporate? Do you feel like you want to try and integrate what you've done before even more into it? Are we going off in new directions? What are you feeling in terms of what those next steps might be beyond this?
Well, I don't think this whole making an album and going away for 2 years thing is really for me. I don't think that I got so many ideas, and making these albums in this very personal way, and making them this sort of intimate time capsule, it does leave a lot of things unsaid, and a lot of songs that I loved didn't make it because they didn't fit this narrative that I was trying to tell. So I have a bunch more songs that I just want to keep putting out. I think that I've had a body of work that was built over a couple years that was more political and subversive in nature. And I do think that I will be returning to write some of those kinds of songs, and getting to the DNA of what people do expect from me in some ways. But I think I've found a groove as far as what I want Grandson songs to sound like. I really do love what this record sounds like, and I think you can expect more that is a little softer around the edges. But I'm still going to be making some hard stuff, some conceptual stuff. I just don't want to stop. I love writing songs, and as long as I'm breathing, I'll be figuring out ways to put them out and have conversations with you about them.
That's really exciting, man. Really, really excited to hear that. And obviously, before I let you go, I've got to mention live shows because, again, listening to this record, it's a whole different vibe. And I'm very excited to see what I imagine will be quite a different type of live show from you when you get these songs up on the stage. I'm taking you're thinking about that, how this is going to work in terms of that new live show. What kind of stage are you at with that at the minute?
I'm so excited. I've never made a live show with this amount of intention behind just what it sounds like, let alone the visual and the stories that we tell on stage. But above all else, I reached out to MDs and band members who weren't necessarily in rock and roll. And I've tried to put together an unconventional, an unexpected rock show that draws on a lot of different genres. And we've put together something that's super musical, unlike anything else that I've personally heard in this space. And I think it's gonna be really good. I got some killers coming on the road with me this year. And that was my goal, was I want the level of musicality. I want the energy to really be something that I haven't brought yet. So coming out, we just sold out London. We threw a second show up. I'm like living on the bus for about 5 months. We're starting and we're not really stopping. So it's impossible to get ready for something like this. You can tell yourself you're ready. You can practice the songs, but to find yourself living out of a suitcase, for extended periods of time like this, giving so much of myself on stage, meet and greets, VIP, all of that every night. It's a lot, but I'm happy to be coming out with this album that's so personal. I'm excited about the opportunity to connect with people, and I've written music that was very much with the live show in mind. So it's right around the corner, and I'm ready to rock.